Okay, again, hope you enjoyed your break. I did ask you to consider attribution theory, and perhaps if you were able to relate it to football. This is what I've got for you, okay? Attribution theory. This focuses on how people explain their successes and failures, what they attribute it to. Some research which was carried out quite a while ago in 1958 by Haider, and then a little bit later by a gentleman called Wiener, okay, in 1985, suggested that possible explanations could be classified into just a few categories. There was stability, something that's fairly permanent or unstable. We could look at something called the locus of causality. Please don't worry about these terms, I will go through them. The locus of causality, well, that cause could be external, an outside cause, or internal, inside factor. We've also got the locus of control, and this refers to a factor and whether or not it is under our control. So let's take a practical example, okay? We could say winning a race or winning a football game. The player or athlete could attribute success to a stable factor, such as their talent and their ability, or an unstable factor, such as luck, okay? They could also attribute success to an internal cause. For example, the tremendous amount of effort they put in to win that game. They may also attribute their success to an external cause. The other team, they weren't so good really, if I'm honest with you, okay? They weren't very good. It was an easy game for us. You see the difference? They might also attribute success to a factor within their control. The tactics that they used, okay? Or a factor outside of their control. The other team you played against, their physical condition. They were better than us. Nothing we could do about that. I'm sure we've all heard that one. So you see the differences there? Which one is the best then? Please take some time to discuss this. Pause the video if you need to, and just take a little few minutes to have a discussion if you can. Okay then, I wonder what you came up with. You might be asking as well now, why are these attributions so important then? Also, if we agree that they're important, then how can they be used to influence motivation? Because that's what we're talking about. And how can they subsequently help us to look at future performances? How can they influence future performance? Well, some research has shown, okay, that attributions affect expectations of future success or failure, and also emotional reactions. And in answer to my original question about which one was best, research again has shown us that it's always better to attribute success or failure to permanent factors that are internal and within our control. Another short task for you, very similar. What I'd like you to do now is, again, please pause the video and take some time to find out the basics of achievement goal theory. In many cases I find it's a good idea to come up with a simple definition for yourself. Something that works for you and means something to you, okay? Take a few minutes to do that, and then I'll get back with the theory, okay? I asked you to go and do a little bit of research there for me on achievement goal theory. I've got some stuff to share with you, of course, okay? We're going to look at three factors, really. And these three factors interact, they work together in some way in order to determine a person's motivation. We can say their achievement goals, outcome, ego, task, okay? We look at this in more detail. Their perceived ability, high or low, and their achievement behavior. In simple terms, to understand someone's motivation, we must understand what success and failure means to that person. Now, I said about finding a definition that works for you, okay? And that simple definition there, that one works for me. It's one I've used in the past. When I was a student, to help me remember things, okay? So try and find something that works for you. You will see the diagram there regarding achievement goal theory and interactionist approach. As I've mentioned a few times, there's a number of factors in there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through the stages, and I'm going to put some meat on the bones then and go through some of the steps there and give you some more information, okay? As you can see from the diagram, there's a lot of different terms. I'm very aware that there's lots to take in here, and some of it might be new for you. So I'm going to explain, or review in some cases, what some of these terms mean. For example, I'm going to look at task orientation and outcome or ego orientation and explain really what they mean. Let's take a look at task orientation, which we see in the achievement goal theory diagram, okay? This psychological construct, well, it basically refers to an individual whose main concern is getting the job done. They're interested in solving problems, working persistently, and doing the best job that they can. Someone with a high level of task orientation. So those people, those who have a high level of task orientation, how do they tend to behave? Well, they tend to compare their performance to personal standards, their own standards. They tend to work well in a group. They're good team players. They perceive that their efforts will help the team overall, and that is one of the reasons that makes them a good team player. They put in a shift, okay? They work hard for everybody else as well as themselves. So we've discussed about really what it means, a brief outline in terms of task orientation. What about the value of it then? Why is it important to us? Why are we even discussing task orientation at this time? Well, sports psychologists, they'll argue that task orientation will lead to a stronger work ethic, persistence in the face of failure, and we know that's good, optimal performance. So if we look at those three things there, particularly the last two, put that into a football context. If I'm a manager or a coach, I've got someone who works hard, doesn't give up, okay, when things go badly, and if they are task orientated, it's likely to lead to an optimal performance. That looks attractive to me in an individual. That's the type of player I want on my team. Task orientation, well, it can also protect a person from disappointment, from frustration, and a lack of motivation when others exceed their performance, when other people beat them. But they don't get frustrated, okay, as much as someone else would perhaps. Their motivation levels stay high, okay. This is looking good, isn't it, if we're a manager or a coach? It's painting a really positive picture for me about this individual. They tend to focus on a person with high level of task orientation. They tend to focus on personal performance, okay. This provides more control, and they can remain more motivated to persist for longer in the face of failure. So that you may have a player, and they may go on playing for a team, and they may lose 3 games in a row, but they'll keep going. They won't give up. Their heads won't drop. And that's important, isn't it? We know that. Also, another positive thing here is that they tend to set realistic tasks, and their perception is based on their own ability, so they have a higher level of perceived competence. Now, let's compare task orientation with ego or outcome orientation. This is also known as competitive goal orientation, and this really kind of defines the tendency of an athlete to do the following: to compare their performances with others. So a player who compares his or her performance with another player, rather than with themselves. Outcome goal orientation can be positive when the player is winning. So for example, there we'll see an increase in perceived competence. Of course, it can also have a negative effect when they are losing. And what we'll see there is the opposite, a lowering of perceived competence and also a lowering of effort perhaps during the game. Let's consider some more issues then with outcome orientation. It's more difficult to maintain high perceived competence levels, okay? Because they judge success by comparisons with others, that's difficult, isn't it? Because we can't control how others perform. Outcome orientation and low perceived competence, that tends to equal a reduction in efforts, stop trying in some cases, okay? They just give up, and excuses. Now, I'm sure we all know a player or an athlete who's always got an excuse. My boots are too tight. It's not my fault. I had a hard day in school today, or my boss gave me a hard time, or I've got a problem with my wife or my partner. They'll make an excuse, okay? Also, another problem that we can see with outcome orientation, that it tends to lead to selection of tasks where success is guaranteed. or a task so hard, no one will expect them to do well, okay? So that can be very difficult for us if we're in a coaching position or a managerial position, if we've got a player like that. They're either going to go and try and do something that doesn't challenge them, or they're going to try and do something that's ridiculously hard for them, and then if they fail, we say, okay, well, we didn't expect you to do well in the first place. Not the ideal player to have on your team, in my opinion, okay? You might think differently, but for me, no. Perceived ability then. I'm very aware, I've mentioned this term a few times, and I'd like to make sure that we're all on the on the same page here and we understand what it means. Just to make sure then. This refers to an individual's assessment of their own ability. In sport, it's regarded as a major construct of achievement behaviour and an important way of determining motivation. In a football context, a player who perceives themselves as having high ability, for example, well, they'll tend to be more motivated than those who perceive themselves as having low ability. Another short task. Please take some time to discuss or think about a player who fits the bill here. I'm sure you know quite a few. Now, they don't have to be Premier League players or players who play in the Championship or play semi-pro. They could be local people. They could be people you play with. Just think of people like that. Someone who thinks of themselves as being quite a good player, they're highly motivated, okay? Perhaps also think of someone who's the opposite, who doesn't think that they're that good and they have low levels of motivation. Always nice to have a practical example. Okay then, that's pretty much it for this section on motivation. Thank you for the effort you put in today. I know a lot of this is new in some cases and it's quite complicated at first, but please bear with us and I'm sure we'll get there in the end. And I really hope you enjoyed this introduction really to sports psychology. There is more to come in future. And I'm also sure that you're all really aware of the importance of psychological issues in football. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to leave you with a quote which is related to motivation from one of our true sporting greats. Champions aren't made in the gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them. A desire, a dream, a vision. That quote comes from, not from a footballer, but comes from, in my opinion, one of the greatest sportsmen of all time, Muhammad Ali. Okay? I think that's a great quote there. There's lots and lots of other ones related to motivation. See if you can find some, or even come up with your own. Come up with your own personal message related to motivation. If you do, please forward it to me and I'll share it with the group, okay? Again, thanks very much for your efforts on this one and enjoy your week.